You're listening to the Connected Parenting Minute with Will and CarrieAnn Sandfest. This podcast is a conversation about parenting, using connection first, trauma-informed principles. Because when you lead with connection, everyone feels seen, which is the foundation to a more peaceful home. This podcast reminds you that you don't have to be a perfect parent, but we can all get a little better, one connected parenting minute at a time.
Thank you so much for joining us again. Welcome back to the Connected Parenting Minute. My name is Will Stanfest.
And I'm CarrieAnn.
And we are so happy you're taking a minute to join us today. So before we just dive right into it, honey, how are you doing tonight? How's your day been?
My day's been pretty good. How about yours? What is your favorite part of today?
My favorite part of today is in 20 minutes when we're done with this. We go jump in the hot tub for a little bit.
Yes. That sounds lovely tonight.
It does. And just for reference sake, in case you don't know, we live in Minnesota. So it is currently, 10 degrees outside, 15?
Something like that. Yeah.
And we're going to go sit in a 102 degree hot tub and it's fabulous.
103, honey.
103. I don't know. But it's fun. It's something we enjoy. It's something we enjoy doing late at night and just kind of relax and talk and look at the stars. It's nice.
It's a good way to connect with each other after connecting with our kids.
Ooh.
Oh.
That was smooth. I like it.
It was smooth.
So today on the podcast, we wanted to talk about this idea of how do I connect with my teenagers? I think it's something that a lot of parents struggle with, whether you have biological kids, foster, adoptive, kinship, whatever. Connecting with teenagers is not something that most parents are good at by default.
No. And I think the first thing we have to address is kind of the elephant in the room is the mentality of teenagers.
Well, before we dive right in.
Okay.
Let's just set the stage here. We currently have 8 forever children, and we've parented another 8 or 10 or something like that through foster care and international orphan hosting and stuff like that. 4 of our kids are currently teenagers. Next year, we have 2 more that become teenagers, and one actually ages out into the 20-somethings stage, which is going to be crazy to think we've got a 20-something-year-old.
Exactly. So we figured at the most we will ever have 5 teenagers unless something changes with the
number of forever kids in our house.
Yeah, exactly. But we're not going to discuss that on the podcast.
Yeah. So we've had a lot of experience around teens, with teens and whatever, and we certainly have not done things perfectly.
Nope.
You can ask our almost 20-something. And I'm pretty sure he will gladly tell you
all the things we've done wrong.
All of the things we've done, because it's not 0.
Poor kid. We keep telling him, buddy, you're the guinea pig. I'm sorry.
You don't come with a manual when you're born for parenting. And so we're kind of just doing our best here. But we have had the advantage over the years of having some good mentors. We've had some good older couples that have spoken into our lives, read about 1 million books on parenting and whatever. And at this point, 20 years into our parenting journey, we've got some perspectives on teenagers. And so, I don't know, we want to just kind of talk through on this episode some of the things we've done right, some of the things we've done wrong. And hopefully it helps some of our listeners get a different perspective or have some ideas on what they can do with their kiddo if they're struggling to connect with their teenager.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So what is your first tip, hon? Where would you start with somebody who's struggling to connect with their teenager?
No, that is a good question. I think one of the things that really stick out to me the most is our perspective.
Okay.
So,
say more about that.
Well, okay. So like I was kind of preluding to, some of the times we tend to have this like, teenagers, they're so difficult mentality. And think about it as an adult, like say you have blonde hair. Okay. And so every time you run into someone, they're like, those blonde hair people. At a certain point, you start going, why do I even want to interact with you? The very idea that we just base a whole like group of people age-wise, like our kids, into this group of like teenagers are so difficult. Teenagers are so moody. Teenagers this, teenagers that. It really just sets the stage for like looking for all the negative things about them. Mm-hmm. And I've found that, like you were saying, we had some really good mentors, and particularly that I can think of, they just love teens. And they were always talking about the fact that they love their teens. And they were so excited when their kids got to be older.
Because I think that was a conversation we even had with that one couple. We were kind of teasing them when a couple of their kids were about to be teenagers and ours were still little bitties. And we're like, oh, you're going to have a bunch of teenagers next year. And she like looked at us totally serious. She's like, I love teens. I can't wait till I have more. I love hanging out with them. They're so much fun. And like, it struck a chord in me like, wow, I want to be like that. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah, no, it really did. And I think from that point forward, I was just kind of like, yeah, teens are going to be good. You know, and it's hard because it depends on where you grow up or who you're around, or, you know, you tend to echo the things that you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, it's like looking and being intentional about that. I think the second thing we need to look at is our perspective towards the teens that we have. I think that really means is that we have to start looking at our children like people. I mean, that seems like super
They're not people?
obvious.
What?
And it seems really dumb, but a lot of times when, you diaper someone and you feed someone and you are constantly responsible for their like literally everything in their life for a long time, and they start getting older and then they start having these opinions, you're like, no, I know what your opinion is.
Right. Well, it's so easy to dismiss because you like you said, somebody you've literally changed their diaper and like you've been in charge of making sure that they like are still breathing tomorrow for like over a decade.
Right.
And it's hard. You get in this mindset that this little person needs me to take care of everything. And it's probably easier if I just do it myself than if I let them do it, because it's going to take longer. It's going to be a mess, or it's not going to be done right.
Right.
Right. I mean, that's the mindset we get into.
No, and that's true. And then even when you think about it, of bringing like kiddos into your home as older kids, as teens, like through adoption or through foster care, a lot of times you assume that maybe they don't know as much as you think they should. And so you end up treating them that way too over time, just because you're like, well, I've got to teach you everything. And so I think the biggest perspective shift I've had to actively take is to stop and be like, would I want my friend to treat me like this? Because we've touched on in our personal conversation the idea of, you know, we really need to have respect for our kids. I mean, like kids in general and our kids in general, but also more specifically, we have to be more intentional about it as our kids get into those teen years and as they get to be older, because we want them to want like our opinions and our thoughts on things. And so if we're not being respectful of them, or if they don't feel safe that, you know, we're going to listen to them and we're going to hear what they have to say and take them seriously, they're not going to want our opinions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's one of those things where when our child feels respected and feels heard, then they're more willing to hear. I mean, I think that kind of the heart of what you're saying, and, you know, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is that we need to shift the perspective that it's easy to look at our 12 or 13 or 14-year-old as a larger version of our 7-year-old, you know, and we need to shift our perspective that if we walked up to a 13-year-old at church, we would expect that they're able to handle some things, you know, and giving our own children that grace, even though we may not see it initially. Fundamentally, I think what you're saying there is that we need to see our kids as small adults, not just large
babies.
I think we need to see our kids as smaller adults that are growing and developing, and not as physically large babies that we have to take care of.
No, I think that's really important. And, you know, I mean, we're talking about teens right now, but I think I'm trying to remember, there was a couple of years when I heard this and it just really made sense to me. The idea that when we start taking our kids' little things, what we consider to be little things, as important things, then when they get to those things that we think are important, they'll be willing to share those things more, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
It goes all the way back down to, you know, little kids, but I think we're specifically trying to keep the topic on teens and not wander.
That's the real answer. If we're being honest, how do you have a better relationship with your teenagers? You start when they're little, you know? And so the more you respect and listen to and develop a relationship with your littles, the easier it is when they're teenagers.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that all hope is lost. We've adopted teenagers, and we've had teenagers come into our home other ways, but like the relationship is still the key here. And so we're talking about perspective. And then I think another key foundational piece of a relationship is respect. Right? Because like the thing I always like to think of is, well, I'm an engineer, and this may shock people to know, but engineers know a lot, and they know that they know a lot. There's a few of us that might be like really certain of what we know and a little condescending. I don't know if you've ever run into an engineer like that. Certainly not me, but okay, maybe me sometimes. I try not to be.
That's okay.
But I can picture people I've interacted with at work, and they are super dismissive of me, in my opinion, because they know exactly what they're talking about, regardless of whether they know exactly what they're talking about. You know? And so if we come across to our kiddos like that coworker, like a lot of us have that coworker where it's this guy who just talks down to you, or just does not listen to you, or is so sure of everything they know that, you're just kind of like, you kind of roll your eyes back and tune them out. It's like, do your kids kind of roll their eyes back and tune you out when you start telling them exactly what you know? It's hard. It's one of those moments. Like I've caught myself treating coworkers that are condescending to me the way my teenager treats me at home. And it's like, am I being that condescending coworker to my teenager? Like, do they feel like I just completely dismiss and ignore them? And is that kind of where some of this relational struggles is coming from?
Yeah. I mean, you think about it, because no matter how absurd or how like emotional or how ridiculous your teen might be in the moment, to them, it's real.
Oh, yeah.
In that moment, how you react to that and how you take it seriously or not, or roll your eyes or just say, well, you're just being an emotional teenager. It's setting the precedent for how, their feelings should be treated by other people even. Like if we constantly dismiss them, then that's kind of be the norm. And we don't want that. We don't want that for our kids.
Well, like you said earlier, would I allow my friend to treat me like this?
Would they still be my friend?
Yeah. And not that we have to be our teenager's friend,
right?
But there's a relational piece there that we're trying to use that as a barometer to gauge how are we relationally treating our children.
Well, and I mean, eventually we want to be friends with our kids.
We do. I mean, when they grow up and move out, eventually we would like them to come around for holidays and, see my grandbabies and all that stuff. And if they can't stand being around us when they're teenagers, that's
going to be debatable.
That doesn't magically fix itself when they turn into their 20s.
Right.
You'll find out that 20-year-olds are just bigger teenagers. Is what we're slowly learning.
Wow. Yep, we're getting there slowly, but.
All right, so we talked about perspective and respect. What else?
Well, I think another really key takeaway from this is like making room for plans other than mine and yours for them. I think one thing that I've noticed even in talking with other parents is, parents have an idea of what they want their kids to do or grow in or accomplish. And I mean, not everybody. Now, I don't. I mean, but I do have expectations of how I think they should behave and how goals that they should have and things that they should do.
Well, maybe what they should do in school.
Right.
What classes should they be taking, when they should be done? What should they be doing this summer?
And so it's tricky because, I have these expectations. Okay, so I'll give you an example. Being on time is really important to me.
Very important. I will.
He will vouch for this.
I will vouch for that.
So it's funny. If you knew me, it's very ironic, but being on time is really important. And so then seeing my kids leave for something, especially our drivers, and know that they physically do not have enough time to get from our house to the place that they're going drives me insane. I'm pretty sure they don't speed. I know that I did when I was that age, but I
never sped ever. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I will vouch. That is a lie. But okay, so you take that, and I stress about that a lot. I've talked to them. I've gone over and over again. And at a certain point, I'm just like, you know what? I need to be able to, in order to save our relationship, that I'm not like constantly nagging them about stuff. I need to let them know it's important to me, but I'm going to choose to let it go.
Mhm.
You're not supposed to be speeding. So please don't do that because it's a safety thing. But if they're late, they're late.
Yeah.
That's on them.
It is.
So a part of this is like taking into consideration that they're forming the people that they are going to be. And I need to be okay with that. It's going to be separate than me. And it's going to be different than what I want for them necessarily. Like there are certain non-negotiables when we have teens and adults living in young adults living in our home. But we have conversations about that with them. And we ask for feedback on that. And this is a constant ongoing thing. And we're learning this. Sometimes I have to ask myself, well, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Mhm.
Like we had a kid that schoolwork was a big deal. And I'm like, okay, stressing me out. Like you're not doing it like I think you should.
Mhm.
But
and occasionally his grades reflected that.
yeah, at a certain point though, I had to go, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm like, he's going to flunk a class. Now, is that the end of the world? No. And so,
but it feels like that until you say it out loud.
Yeah, until you address what is the issue? Why is this stressing me out so much? Like, I desperately don't want our kids to fail, but they have to be able to make mistakes on their own, and they have to be able to manage those mistakes. And so, what do I remember from being a teen? I remember the adults that took me seriously, and I remember the ones that didn't. And I remember feeling capable because people believed in me.
Yeah.
And so I want that for my kids, and I want them to get that from us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other people too, but definitely us. And so that brings us back to like really the other big takeaway is asking them what they need.
Asking for their perspective, what they see as their struggles.
Right. So say, for instance, the on time thing, if I come up to them and say, hey, this is really important to me. I'm going to stop, asking you about it all the time. But what do you need? Like, are you okay with that? With being late? Not in a condescending way, but like talking to them and honestly asking their opinion. If they're like, no, be like, okay, killing me slowly inside, but it will be okay because it's not as important to them as it is to me. And that's okay because we're different people. But if they're like, oh, I hate being late, I'm struggling with this so much, my response can be, well, what do you need? What can I help you with? Is there some way that I can help you set up a system so that you're in a good spot for this? Can we brainstorm some ideas? Can we use your phone for a timer? Whatever it is.
Yeah, that's the stuff that a lot of us as parents want to do with our teenagers. We want to come alongside them and coach them and encourage them and get them to that place where we're partnering with them to help them be better. I think that comes down the road though. That comes from a place of they feel respected, they feel heard, they feel like you value them and you look at them in a positive light. And then you can get to the place where you can coach and encourage and come alongside them.
Yeah. And I think it's about having those conversations over and over, and not in a condescending way again, but like helping them reflect on what it is they need and what it is that they struggle with on their own terms, because that's a life skill, is be able to look at yourself and say, hey, I'm wrestling with this. I wonder why. Yeah.
And it's a good thing for us to model as we talk to them too. All right. So I think that was a lot of good stuff. So let's do a quick wrap up. And what are like the 3 big takeaways out of how to connect with our teenagers? When you're struggling to connect, when you're struggling to have a relationship, what are the 3 things you want people to remember?
I think the first one is changing your perspective, making sure that you're looking at them with respect. Make room for plans other than your own for them. Look at what they might want out of their life and start taking that seriously. And then be asking them, prompting them, what do they need? Like not only from you, but what do they need to succeed for themselves?
Kind of prompting that self-reflection piece. Yeah, no, that's really good. Thanks for those thoughts, hon. I enjoy having this conversations with you.
Absolutely.
On our next episode, we'll go into part 2 of this topic where we can talk more about, okay, so now your teen feels respected and heard and can talk to you and stuff like that. Now what? Now what do you do to have a better relationship with your teens?
Yeah, definitely. That'll be fun.
It's my favorite part. It's having fun with your teens.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you so much for taking some time and listening to the podcast. We're here to remind you
that you don't have to be a perfect parent,
but we can all get a little bit better, one connected minute at a time.
Thank you so much for listening to my mom and dad's podcast. I hope you feel really inspired today, and remember to subscribe for the next episode.
For more parenting tips or to connect with us, check out the Connected Parenting Minute on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Or you can send us an email using connectedparentingminute@gmail.com.